News of the Times. The murder at Blaw Wearie. Welcome to News of the Times. In today's episode, it is 1844 in the remote location in Scotland known as Blaw Wearie, near West Calder in Scotland. The remote community is shocked at the discovery of the horrifically murdered John Geddes, a single man estimated to be around 60 years of age. He was quiet and a man who kept to himself. Rumour had it that Geddes had considerable hidden wealth, but this was not something he flaunted himself. Neighbours, not seeing him as usual, agreed to break down the door, and there they find Geddes, an eye knocked into his fractured skull, nearly all his ribs broken, and with his nose and a finger cut off. It is a bloody, hideous sight. We take a look at this case that shocked the community. And in today's end of episode, further particular story from 1801, a mysterious teak box washes ashore. Inside are layers of tea leaves with the body buried deep within. As our tale begins beneath gaslight and guilt, may we entreat you to like, subscribe and share. Each action is a deft turn of the key in the cryptic lock that is the YouTube algorithm. And now, the horrific case of John Geddes awaits. Background. John Geddes. Geddes was known as a loner in the small cottage in a remote part of Scotland. His cottage had another next to it, but even this close neighbour knew little about him. It was estimated that he was around 60 years of age, never married, and he had no one to care for him. He was known to be tight with money, seldom spending on himself. Geddes had worked as a labourer, but now made and sold brooms. He was rumoured to have considerable money, though he did not flash any wealth he had around. He did, however, have a large gold watch, which he used regularly, and from which it would seem he derived much pleasure of its ownership. James Bryce. James Bryce was considerably less financially fortunate. He had been at one time Geddes's brother-in-law with a marriage to Geddes's sister. Bryce had been married several times previously and had 4 children. His son's wedding is coming up, but Bryce has little to offer financially to either his son or towards the wedding day festivities itself, until he surprisingly does. In the meantime, the neighbours of Geddes have become concerned, and a decision is made to force their way in case Geddes himself is lying inside, somehow incapacitated. What they witness is utterly shocking. From the Scotsman, the 3rd of January 1844, the shocking murder near West Calder. On Sunday last, the dead body of an old man named John Geddes, a labourer residing in a cottage by himself on the farm of Longford, about 3 miles from West Calder in this county, was found in a shockingly mangled state on the floor of his own dwelling. He had been missing for several days, but as he was in the frequent habit of working at a distance from home, no alarm was excited amongst the neighbours till Saturday night, when there was no appearance of him as usual. On Sunday thereafter, it was resolved to break open the house to see whether he might not be lying ill, when they were horrified to find his murdered body stretched on the floor in a state almost indescribable. On removing an old shirt which was thrown over the body, they found a deep fracture in the skull, the left eye knocked into the head, the bone of the eyebrow broken, the nose and fingers off, the jawbone and collarbone, and all his ribs broken but two. A more horrible sight has seldom been seen, and a pair of tongs covered with blood were found at the fireside, with which the wounds had evidently been inflicted. The sheriff and procurator fiscal visited the spot on Monday to investigate into the circumstances, but so far as we can learn, no positive clue has yet been found to the murderer or even the cause of murder. The deceased, although a labourer, had the reputation of some wealth, and probably the possession of that might have been the object of the murderer, but we have not learned whether anything has been stolen. The event has, of course, caused a great sensation in the district in which it has occurred. We may state that the cottage in which the deceased resided is one of two which stand at a considerable distance from any others, and that no noise of any kind was heard by the neighbours to lead them to suspect what had occurred. The murder is supposed to have taken place several days before the discovery. The motive, quite clearly, is one of theft. What is quite interesting is the disappearance of Geddes' watch, which was most distinctive. In the small, remote community, strangers to the area were more of an anomaly, and a suspect quickly emerges. From the Scotsman, the 10th of January, 1844, murder at West Calder. We published in our paper on Wednesday last an account of a murder of a very barbarous description, perpetrated on a man named Geddes, residing in a lonely house near the village of West Calder. Since then, the authorities have been unremitting in their exertions to discover the murderer, and from the information which has since been obtained, there is too much reason to fear that the crime was committed by a person standing in the relation to the murdered man of a brother-in-law. It was formally stated that the murder, although only discovered on Sunday the 31st inst, must have been committed some days before, and we now learn that it must have been done so far back as the Tuesday evening previous. At least that was the last evening the deceased is known to have been alive. He resided in one of two houses which stood apart from all the others, nearly a mile from West Calder, and in a dreary and desolate tract of country known by the appropriate title of Blaw Wearie. It had originally been a labourer, but he had latterly taken to the trade of making and vending brooms, and being a person of very penurious habits, without anyone residing with him, he had accumulated a considerable sum of money, and probably obtained the reputation of having more than he actually possessed. It is certain, however, that at the last Hallow Fair he accommodated a neighbouring farmer with a loan of £30, which was paid back only a few days before the murder, value approximately £4,000 in 2025. This sum, and probably the whole of the deceased's savings, which, with his singular prejudices, belonged to it, for he refused to deposit it in any bank, must have constituted the principal object of the murderer. The person who is suspected of committing this horrid crime is a man named James Bryce, a labourer, who resided for some time at Dundivan, but within this week or two shifted his house to Airdrie. He is a man of notoriously bad habits, and he has been convicted and punished for sheep stealing, and at this moment there is a warrant issued against him on the charge of stealing poultry in the parish of Hamilton. Some years ago he lived with, for it seemed doubtful if they were ever married, a sister of the murdered Geddes, and by her he had 3 children, who are now living. After her death, he married his present wife, by whom he has also a family, most of whom are very young. About 18 years ago, when Geddes' sister was living, he borrowed £3 from his brother-in-law, Geddes, and left his watch with him till he should be paid, which he seems he was never able to do, as the watch was well known to have been in Geddes' possession till the time of the murder. After the woman's death, he still appears to have paid occasional visits to his wealthy brother-in-law, and at the last, as it should seem, with the view of robbing him. For Bryce was heard to congratulate himself that he had got Geddes away this time without giving him anything. On Tuesday the 26th inst, it appears that Bryce left home with the expressed intention of visiting his friends in the east of the county, and on the evening of that day, when the murder is supposed to have been committed, Geddes' neighbour heard voices in his house as if another man were with him. For some time before this, Bryce and his family had been wretchedly poor, but on the Wednesday he returned home boasting that he had got plenty of money and that he would not need to want any more. To confirm his words, he bought new clothes for himself and his family. He also spent a considerable sum of money on whisky, especially on the following day, when one of his sons, a nephew of Geddes, was married in Airdrie, and on that occasion he produced a watch and told the company that it had been his watch 18 years ago, that he had given it to a sister of his in Leith, which she now has returned with a large sum of money which had placed him above want. The son, however, recognised it as another one which was stolen from Geddes' house, and which it is also supposed was in Bryce's possession. His uncle's watch, but at this time, of course, the murder was not known. On Friday, Bryce went to Glasgow and pledged the watch which had been his own, but on the following day his wife came into Glasgow and released it, but it has since disappeared, along with the number, however, which was on the pawn ticket, and it has been recovered. Though a murder so brutal and barbarous as this which was formerly described could not possibly be long hidden, it does not appear that Bryce for some time made any attempt to escape. Up to Monday last week, on New Year's Day, he remained at home with his family in Airdrie, making no attempt at concealment. Had he persisted in this conduct to the last, it would, of course, have formed some presumption of his innocence. But on that day he left home, as he said, to see some friends in the West, and from that time to this, no one has been able to apprehend him. It is not at all likely, however, that he can much longer escape. From circumstances, it is plain that he cannot be far away from Airdrie. Nay, it has been rendered apparent that even in the heat of the search against him, he has returned more than once to his own house. We've heard that on Thursday last the house was searched, and nothing was found in it worthy of notice, and that on the following day a second search having been determined on, the dress which he usually wore and which was not there on the previous day was discovered. It is even said that so close were the Airdrie police officers on his track at one time that when they went into his house at the front, Bryce contrived to escape by a back door. We give these, of course, as the rumours of the day, but there can be no doubt. We understand that he is still lurking in the neighbourhood, and, if so, it is scarcely possible that he should much longer remain at large. From the state in which Geddes' cottage was found when it was first entered after the murder, there can be no doubt that the object of the murderer was plunder. We have already adverted to the fact of money being in the house, and we may mention that on a search being instituted, no part of it was found except £1 note, and that under singular circumstances. In a large chest there were found 3 pocket books, all torn open and thrown down, as if after being rifled of their contents, and near them was the note, lying amongst some clothes, as if it had dropped out of one of the pocket books, and had been unobserved by the murderer in his haste to secure the rest of the spoil. From the close manner in which it was folded, it did not appear to have been in a bundle with others, but rather than each note had been folded separately and tightly compressed, so as to make the least possible bulk in the pocket book. This shocking affair has excited, as may well be supposed, a painful interest in West Calder and the neighbourhood. A reward of £50 has been offered by the authorities for the apprehension of Bryce, and another reward of £5 for the recovery of the watch we have alluded. The advertisement, which will be seen in another column, contains a full description both of the person and the dress of Bryce. For a few days, Bryce, as the primary suspect in the Geddes killing, is searched for throughout the area. Newspapers are filled with his description. A reward of £50 is on offer for the successful capture of Bryce, value approximately £6,500 in 2025. It takes but a few days and Bryce is captured from a tip-off by a schoolmaster who believed he recognised him from the description in the papers. From the Scotsman, the 17th of January 1844, the West Calder murder. The apprehension of Bryce. James Bryce, the alleged perpetrator of the atrocious murder at West Calder, was apprehended in the vicinity of Dumfries on Friday and brought to Edinburgh on Monday. He is now in the Calton jail. The subjoined particulars of his apprehension are from the Dumfries Courier of yesterday. The story of his apprehension is somewhat curious. He was seen on Wednesday last walking on the Glasgow and Dumfries road by an individual, a schoolmaster, who had just been reading a description of the suspected murderer and who had travelled with him a long part of the road from Sanquhar to Thornhill. This person was so struck with the resemblance that on returning to Sanquhar in the evening, he gave information to 2 officers in that burgh, Donaldson, the sheriff officer, and Reed, a member of the rural police force stationed there. Bryce was immediately brought before Mr. Jones, the superintendent of the Dumfries Rural Police, to whom he at first denied his identity and gave the feigned name of James White, but afterwards confessed that he was in reality James Bryce, although he stoutly insisted on denying the charge. He stated, as the reason for leaving Airdrie, that from the excitement of public feeling and the suspicion attached to him, he was under the apprehension of being mobbed and assaulted, and had left his residence solely for the purpose of avoiding maltreatment. Another account states that he denies having seen his murdered brother-in-law later than 3 or 4 weeks before New Year's Day, and he pretends that he is still alive for anything known to him. Bryce is held, and a search of himself and his property is underway. Numerous distinctive articles of clothing known to have belonged to Geddes are found in Bryce's possession. The all-important distinctive watch is found at a pawnbroker's in Glasgow, and although the watch was pledged by a woman, the associated pawn ticket is found in the possession of Geddes. With the numerous items known to belong to Geddes found on his person and in his lodgings, the pawn ticket to the distinctive watch found in his pocket, his sudden new-found wealth, and various locals having seen Geddes in the vicinity of Goddess's cottage, Bryce is found guilty within the inquest. He will go to trial. From the Scotsman, the 16th of March, 1844, the West Calder murder. The court met today for the trial of James Bryce, indicted for the murder of John Geddes. The case excited much interest, the doors of the court being besieged from an early hour, whilst every place inside the court was crowded to excess. The judges on the bench were the Lord Justice Clerk and Lords Mackenzie and Moncrieff. The indictment charged the prisoner with alternative charges of murder and robbery, setting forth that on the 26th and 27th of December 1843, within a dwelling house situated at Blaw Wearie, parish of West Calder, then occupied by John Geddes, labourer, the prisoner did, with intent to possess himself of money and goods belonging to Geddes, attack and murder him as he did with a pair of tongs or other instruments, inflicting several severe blows on his head and face and other parts of his body, and did injure and compress his throat to strangle him, or nearly so, and did with his feet or knees trample and press upon his breast or sides, by all of which Geddes was mortally injured in his person, his skull and his lower jaw and his ribs being fractured, and in consequence thereof he immediately or soon after died, and was thus murdered by the said James Bryce. The charge for robbery bore that Bryce, having so attacked and assaulted Geddes, did wickedly and feloniously, and by force and violence, rob him of a sum of money in current coin or in bank notes, the amount and particular description therefore being unknown, but part thereof in the amount of £5 being in half-crown pieces or other silver coin, a canvas or harn bag, a silver watch, a pair of shoes, a belt for the waist, and a bolster slip or 2 pillow slips sewed together, the property of the said John Geddes, and that Bryce, being conscious of his guilt in the premises, did abscond and flee from justice. There was another charge varying the crime of robbery to that of theft. The prisoner pleaded not guilty to all the charges. The prosecution case is thorough, with the witness after witness being brought forward testifying to having seen him in the vicinity. The evidence of the watch is damning, as is his being in his possession of the very specialized shoes that Geddes was known to wear. Other witnesses are brought forward testifying to his sudden change of fortune, as he purchased a tweed jacket and was very free with his money for drink at the occasion of his son's wedding. The prosecution case is able to trace Bryce's steps from the days before the expected murder date to his actions several days after the murder was discovered. The defence, for their part, urges the circumstantial nature of the evidence. Yes, Bryce was seen near the area, but so were several others. He does not manage to explain all of the evidence away, but it is a valiant effort. It takes the jury 45 minutes to confirm the guilt of Bryce. From the Scotsman, the 16th of March, 1844, the West Calder murder. The jury then retired, and after being absent for about 3/4 of an hour, returned into the court unanimously finding the panel guilty of the charges as libelled. Then, putting on the black cap, his lordship solemnly read the following sentence: "The Lord Justice Clerk and the Lord Commissioners for Judiciary, in respect of the above verdict, discern and adjudge the said James Bryce to be carried back from the bar to the prison, there to be detained and fed on bread and water till the 3rd day of April next, and on that day, between the hours of 8 and 10, to be taken from the said prison to the common place of execution in the Lawn Market, or to such other fitting place within their bounds and territories as to the magistrates acting on competent authority may seem to meet, and there, by the hands of the common executioner, to be hanged by the neck on a gibbet till he is dead. We ordain his body to be buried within the precincts of the prison, and declare his goods and movables to be escheat to her Majesty, which said his lordship, removing the cap, I pronounce for doom, and may the Lord have mercy upon your soul." Bryce, who did not appear to exhibit any emotion during this address, was then removed in custody, and the crowd in court dispersed. The prisoner is about 60 years of age. He showed no sign of emotion during the whole of the trial, but he kept looking down towards the floor almost the entire time. There will be no commutation for Bryce. The barbarity of the crime assures that. Bryce, whilst in prison, is said to be a model prisoner. Before his execution, Bryce confesses his life and his crimes. From the Scotsman, the 6th of April, 1844, Statement and Confession of James Bryce. The following statement and confession was emitted by Bryce on the day before his execution. I was born at Dalmahoy in the parish of Ratho, and I am, I think, 43 or 44 years of age. My father was a shoemaker. I was put to school when about 6 years old and remained at it for about 5 years, but was frequently away from it in summer herding cows. I was not attentive when at school and often grieved my parents, who often warned me and did all they could to make me do right, but I did not take their advice. My father was a sober and good man, and when I was at home went to the church or meeting house with him every Sabbath day. Had I followed his example and advice, I would have led a different life and have come to a different end. I was occasionally coming and going to my father's house till I was about 16 years old, when I left altogether as a residence. Since I left, I have been led a loose and bad life, drinking and bad company of all kinds from that time got the better of me. I went into sins of all kinds. When working among all sorts of people at public works, the temptations were very great, and I readily yielded to them. When I was about 19 years of age, I was married to my first wife, but this did not mend me. When I wanted any of my children baptized, I was obliged to make my appearance at the church for a few days, but I had no other or better object in doing so. My first wife lived about 11 years and died, leaving me with 4 children. I was a widower about 16 months, and then married my present wife, who has often warned me about my wicked life and advised me to leave it off and go to the church. She is not to blame in any way for my present condition, for had I taken her advice, I would never have come to anything wrong. No one is to blame but myself. I have been a bad husband and a careless and bad father. I neither showed a good example nor gave proper advice. I sometimes tried to do better, but the wickedness was so far into me that I could not. I often took drink and used to swear. I was oftener drunk on the Sabbath day than on any other day. Since I got the last child baptized about 3 years ago, I was seldom or never at church. I was out of regular work about 3 months before I committed the crime for which I am to suffer. My family were rather badly off during that time, but my sister's husband was very kind and often supplied us with a meal. I had too sometimes got assistance from John Geddes, and at one time, about 2 years ago, I got £1 from him and left him my watch as a pledge. After that, I sent my daughter to him and got another £1. My family and myself had fever at this time and were badly off. When I went to him the night before the awful deed was done, which made me a murderer, it was with a view to get a little money from him to put over at my son's wedding, as I wished to have him married. I arrived at his house about 6 in the evening, as near as I can judge. To induce him to give me the money, I told him a lie. I said one of the children was dead, and I had no means to bury it. I asked for 10 shillings, and at last came down to 5, but he would not give me it. This was in the morning. We went to bed about 10 o'clock. We had no quarrel or angry words that night, as I had said that I wished to bury the child that day, and as I had about 20 miles to walk, I rose at about 4 o'clock in the morning to make him the more readily believe me and to give me the money. He rose at the same time to make me some breakfast, but would not give me the money. We had some angry words, and I insisted to have my watch, but he refused to give me it. I was sitting at the fire and had the tongs in my hand. He had just put the pot on the fire and was turning round when it came into my heart to murder him, and I struck him down with the tongs. He never spoke, but I kept beating him after he was down. I struck him many blows, and when he began to stir, I took a cord which was lying on the floor and put it around his neck to strangle him should he come to life again. I then took a purse out of a chest. The purse contained £6 in silver and 2 bad half-crowns. I also took a pair of shoes, but I took nothing else. If there was any paper money, I did not see it. I did not take a belt, and being near to death, I solemnly declare that the belt shown me in the court at my trial was my own belt, and that it never was in anyone's possession but mine. I lined it and put the pouch in it myself. I had worn it rather more than 5 years. I acknowledge that my sentence is just, and I hope my shameful death will be a warning to all who are leading such careless and sinful lives as I have done. This statement and confession have been written at my request, with the view of it being published. It has been read over to me 4 times and is all true, and not being able to write, I have put my mark to it before 3 witnesses on this, the last day of my life. Bryce is executed before a crowd estimated at 30,000 people. Further particulars. This interesting letter comes to us from 1809, where a kindly soul is aware of the body of a woman in a box encased in tea leaves, having washed upon the shore. Body, box, tea leaves. This is not a combination that often comes to our attention. From the London Chronicle, 21st of April, 1809. Dear Sir, I beg leave to mention the following circumstances and leave to your better judgment the propriety of making the same public. About a fortnight since, the overseer on the camp estate discovered a chest floating in the wash of the sea, and with the assistance of several, he had brought it on shore. On opening it, it was found to contain a female corpse, wrapped in several folds of cere cloth, and a quantity of tea was spread between each fold. The box or coffin was also filled up with tea to the quantity it was supposed of 200 weight. The body was in a tolerable state of preservation, and had the appearance of having been that of a person of about 30 years of age, rather corpulent, with a remarkable handsome hand, a good set of teeth, and long dark hair. The mouth had been filled with tea, and some moisture having occasioned the tea to swell, left the teeth exposed. On touching them, one fell in. The box was better than 6 feet long, and made remarkably strong, having 16 iron clamps, the whole of it covered with cloth, which had burgundy pitch rubbed over it, and it was perfectly watertight. It must have been in the sea a very long time, as it had a number of barnacles upon it. The wood was supposed to be what is called in the East Indies teak wood. Around the middle of the box was a tarred rope, which had the appearance of having suspended it, or having been a lashing to it. Should the publishing of this account be the cause of making it known to the relatives of the deceased, it may prove grateful to their feelings to know that the body was decently interred in this island, and every attention paid to it. I remain, dear sirs, yours very truly, J.N. Colquhoun Mills. To the very Reverend the Dean of St. Asaph. That concludes this episode of the murder at Blaw Wearie. We hope tonight's tale has both chilled and captivated your sensibilities. Should it have fallen short of your expectations, we invite you to pen a most sternly worded letter to the scriptwriter. Although be advised, they are currently indisposed, last seen boarding a steamship under an assumed name. But if you found yourself suitably enthralled, we entreat you, as any respectable patron of intrigue would, to like, subscribe, and share this account with your most discerning associates. Should actions not only feed the ever watchful beast they call the YouTube algorithm, but also ensure our parlour remains lit, and these tales of shadow and scandal continue to reach eager ears across the empire. This has been News of the Times, and I remain Robin Coles, allowing you a moment's respite, though history offers none.